So hello and welcome to the 2023 Mercedes Matter Awards Ceremony. I'm Kara Carmack, Assistant Director of Exhibitions and Public Programs at the New York Studio School, and I'm delighted in my role at the school to have worked with 129 of our alums from around the world to showcase 176 artworks in this year's Alumni exhibition. Since submissions are completed online, we're able to gather some fun data, such as your primary locations. And here we can see where this year's submitters hail from, with the Northeast, perhaps unsurprisingly, given the location of the school, leading the count. The Alumni exhibition is a significant way to bring together our dispersed community annually, which grows each and every year as new graduates graduate from our programs. This year's show once again celebrates the inspiring range of work to which our artists have dedicated their lives and practices, from painting, drawing, and sculpture to photography, fiber art, and an array of work on paper. And to highlight some of the works in the exhibition, I'm honored to welcome this year's esteemed jurors, Choghakate Kazarian and Alexi Worth, who have selected this year's 2023 Mercedes Matter Award winners. Unfortunately, our third juror is unable to join us. I'll begin by introducing Shorakat, who will then talk to us about her selections, and perhaps Alexi will chime in as well. And then I'll introduce Alexi, and he and Shorakat will discuss Alexi's selections. We'll reserve time at the end for Q&A, so please submit your questions at any time by clicking on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, rather than the chat. Choghakate Kazarian is an Armenian-born French curator and art historian now based in New York City. She was formerly curator at the Musée d'Art Moderne de Paris and taught at the École de Louvre. She's curated exhibitions on artists such as Lucio Fontana, Piero Manzoni, Carl Apple, and Henry Jarger, with accompanying exhibition catalogs. And she has written essays on post-war art, contemporary art, and outsider art. She has participated in several studio critiques at the New York Studio School for the sculpture marathons. She is editor-at-large at the Brooklyn Rail and is writing her doctoral dissertation on Albert Pinkham Ryder. She is currently the curator of the upcoming exhibitions Immersion, The Origins, 1949 to 1969, at the Musée Cantonal des Beaux-Arts de Lausanne in Switzerland, and Mood of the Moment, Gabby Egion and the House of Chloe at the Jewish Museum in New York, which I know you just installed and is opening very, very soon.
Unfortunately, not finished. We're in the middle of this.
Oh, you're still in the middle. Well, we're wishing you best of luck.
Please excuse me if my brain is entirely fried, but it's good to take some fresh air.
Yes, we'll give you some other things to think about and talk about today.
Thank you. Thank you, Kara, for inviting me in this exciting online exhibition. I just wanted to say a few words before I start about a little bit about my process. I was very happy to participate into this, but I was also very frustrated that it's online. And as a curator, I always make it a priority to see works in person. And I can proudly say that of all the exhibitions I've curated, I've seen 90% at least of all the works in the show before. So I know who they are in person. So the experience was frustrating, but also interesting because I know how many possibilities it gives to so many artists to participate in this project, which obviously doing it in person would not have been possible, at least not in this format. And I also know that for many art professionals, just looking at images is also something that we all do during the preparation of any project. However, I hope to be able to see these works in person one day. And regarding my process, I obviously looked first at the images without looking at names, not that it would have meant much to me, but just going very intuitively and selecting the works that just jump obviously to me. Obviously, I went a little bit further. For some people, I've been tempted to Google them, look more, although it was not part of the process. I know you're supposed to do just the works you see, but however, it was tempting and we all do that. So here's my selection, and I'll start with Susan Arena. This works was really probably the one that really jumped at me immediately. There was a very immediate connection, probably because it was one of the first that appeared when I opened the link, but also it was so strong. I think there were two aspects in this work that really interested me. There was this haunting female presence that seemed to come from ancient times, clearly in the gesture that is very dramatic and intense, with this black figure of woman in the middle. We don't know if she's flying, she's trying to escape something or welcome something, embrace something or donate something, but it's a gesture that is extremely intense, with a lot of heavy meaning, in a sense that it made me think of the word gravitas that was used by the Greeks to define the beauty of the statues of the gods, that has this kind of monumentality, but a certain weight to that beauty. It's not a light-spirited beauty, but something very heavy and intense. And there was also this game, this more decorative game with the patterns, with the pomegranates. Probably as an Armenian, I'm naturally attracted to the pomegranates, or probably any Mediterraneans and Middle Easterns are. But it's also a general, there's something very Mathesian to it as well, like cutouts, and the stripes on the woman on the right, and the way that there were these vertical stripes, but also the horizontal ones, hiding her eyes. There's a theme of blindness in this image that's very strong and intense, that I found very interesting. And the way how this character on the right is treated and painted, the clothes, the nudity that is covered by this decorative pattern, the flowers she's holding. There's something that tells a story without being too chatty that I liked a lot about this work. I think we can jump to the next.
Sure.
This is also among the works that talk to me immediately. I'm also self-conscious about the fact that it must be because of my deep interest in outsider art, Sunday painters, naive art, although none of these artists are self-taught, obviously. But there is a certain outsider naive aesthetics, I think, in most of the works I've chosen. It was not conscious, but when I looked at the PowerPoint, I realized, there's a pattern here that, of course, I think comes from my personal interest. And in this work, I liked how there was something very genuine and obvious in the use of colors, how bold they are. There's something very happy in this blooming, very generous, but also flowers are a very complicated theme. They can be a bit threatening. And I remember Andy Warhol saying that if I wanted to make a sex movie, I would have just shown how flower gives birth to another flower. Kind of tells you how much more complicated and less innocent our flowers are, with these little details of the inside and outside. We can move to the next. This is also something I connected very immediately. It reminded me a little bit of the work of Florence Dettheimer. It has this kind of campy, outsider, almost kitsch and bad taste in it, but in a very interesting way, very genuine and direct, that I found interesting. There was something almost annoying in this very descriptive portrait in the middle, but also this assemblage of different works. There's something that plays with good and bad taste that I found very interesting in this painting. And I could guess that there's something very painterly about the texture of the flowers. So that's it. Can we move to the next? Oh, well, when I saw this picture, I kind of pre-selected it because I thought, what the hell is that? There's something very mysterious about it. It looks almost like NASA's pictures of the planet Earth or any planet from afar. It has something very photographic about it. And I've I've been trying to understand what that is, what material it is, how it's made. And when I've reached my selection of about 15 works, and it was among the 5 I wasn't sure about, should I cut it or not, because I couldn't understand what it was. And there was something mysterious about it, but also it appeared, I was deeply attracted to it. But on the other hand, I thought, isn't it just beautiful by accident? There was this kind of feeling I had. It could have been just a paper, and then I put my mug on it, and that's the trace by accident, this kind of accidental beauty. But the fact that it generated so much questions and thoughts, I thought that I should select it. But although I didn't know why I was interested in it, but for me, it was a prix spécial du jury. We can see the next one. This work was a bit different from the others that had they have more pictorial quality to it because of this. It's quilt, so it plays with pattern, the decorative in a very direct way. I've been a little frustrated by the image because it felt, I don't know exactly how the photo has been taken, but it felt very flat. So I had to imagine how the work is in reality. I can imagine it has much more texture and depth than in this image, where it seems very flat, almost as a computer generated image, although I can imagine the real thing. And I was very interested in all those images that play in a very direct way with it decorative. Next. Alexi, thank you. I know we shared this work. Again, I think I've been wondering if I was attracted to this work because of my interest in UFO paintings and artists like Lionel Talpazan and all those artists interested in the esoteric, the paranormal, and this work really reminds all that imagination and iconography. However, the work is a monumental size, and I believe it has a almost totemic feeling in it. And I like that it played with the mechanical, somehow representing something that is made of metal and like a machine, but also the way it's painted, you can see drips of paint that kind of break with that kind of symmetrical and mechanical thing. And I was also curious about this mix of materials that almost there's something attractive, but also repulsive with this fish vertebrae. And I know, Alexa, do you want to say something about this?
Well, I agree with everything you were just saying. Also, it was a pleasure that it busted out of so many of the other images. There were a lot of the pictures we were looking at that were connected or in a kind of related versions of styles that could be cousins to one another. And this one felt like it was in its own category. That was, I think that gave it a little extra oomph. But I agree with you that the materials are intriguing. We can't see them, so we don't know. Like how much relief is there to the black glass element at the top? But it felt funny. It felt kind of coarse and bold. It felt like I would love to know more about the references. Like to me, the UFO art is not a category I am especially, committed to or interested in usually, but here I suddenly thought maybe I am. And I could imagine quite different backstories for this image in multiple directions that, and I agree with you also, there's a kind of ugliness, a kind of coarseness in both positive and negative senses to it. But I just definitely wanted to know more about where this artist could go from here.
Yes, me too. And I wanted to see really in person, especially this large scale. I mean, it has a very intense, it's not human scale, but quite close. So how you interact with it is very interesting at that scale.
Seemed like very dopey and smart at the same time.
Shall we move? Oh, next one. Oh, I love this one also. It was a kind of obvious choice for me. It's a painting that plays with so many symbols of folk and kitsch art, mixing them together in such bold colors. I think the other artist who used those bold colors is Bob Thompson. I thought of his colors with this painting, and it's so bold, and the way that there's something very pictorial about it, especially in the background, how things mix together, and disregarding of what means to be good, have good taste, bad taste, and mixing these references together, conveying these three big characters to the right kind of have an apocalyptic feeling to it, as if they were announcing something tragic or important to come, while the rest is as if they were just decorative motifs like the boats, this animal, and just very passive characters to the left. And yeah, the color were very impressive, especially this green at the bottom. It has the color of kryptonite, you know, this kind of almost toxic green that I loved. We can move to the next. I noticed there's a sort of, as I was saying, this kind of outside aesthetics that kind of is probably what most of the works I've selected have in common. This one is very different, but I was very intrigued by the ambition of this painting. There's something extremely ambitious in it to have this certain command of space. Interesting colors, this kind of earthy colors that reminded me of Polyakov's paintings in the 50s. Very, this kind of how it plays with flatness, the decorative, the figurative, and abstractions that I found very interesting. We can move to the next. I've been thinking about this image, and should I select it? Should I not select it? Because I was attracted to it, but then I questioned my own taste, because I'm a very huge fan of this French artist, Eugène Leroy, who also takes several years to paint this very thick paints. And obviously I'm a fan of Albert Pinkham Ryder, so I'm very much into these crusty surfaces of paintings. So it kind of made me question how much is there a pattern in me that makes me being interested in this work. So I've been looking a lot, and I found it very interesting because there's some intensity in it, the way that there's this kind of face that merges into the background through several layers that comes out at you. There was also this intensity and tragedy. And there was something, a dustiness in it also, because, I mean, in a literal sense, because paintings trap dust, but also something a bit more symbolical and metaphorically, and how much experience the paint has embodied during the process. Next. As the quilt before, I was very interested in the decorative aspect of this work and how it plays with patterns as if it was a fabric. And I don't know exactly how much of the surface is silk screen or wallpaper, but I was very much attracted to this little hand and the way it was handled, and the bottom right of the skirt, how it merges almost into the background, and the interaction of these different patterns, and the hat also. And I mean, there was something bold about it in mixing patterns that I found very interesting. Okay, I'm gonna stop here to give
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's so interesting to see, you know, your selections feel like you also. So that's one of the beautiful things about these.
I know one day an artist told me, basically creators and art historians, when they write about an artist, they just write about themselves. I thought he was unfair, but yeah, I think there's something about that.
Absolutely. Well, now we'll see how we can understand Alexi through a new way. So I'm delighted to introduce Alexi Worth, a painter and critic. His flat, precise figuration has received awards from the Guggenheim and Tiffany Foundations and is represented by the D.C. Moore Gallery in New York. Roberta Smith of the New York Times praised Worth's work as representing the continued vitality of painting since 2000, wryly labeling it realism with benefits. Since the late 1990s, Worth has also written about art for The New Yorker, Art Forum, Art in America, Art News, Cabinet, Slate, T, and other magazines. Recently, he has written catalog texts for artists such as Carol Dunham, Jackie Sacoccio, Jim Nutt, Martha Armstrong, and Jasper Johns. He lives in Brooklyn with his wife, the architect Erica Belsey, and their 2 sons. So thank you, Alexi, for joining us today.
Glad to be here. So, I was just texting with Kara saying next time we should alternate. It's sort of fun to go back and forth because I feel like our tastes are so different, as everybody will see. They had that one overlap, but otherwise, it's fun. It's just we're different, visual personalities or appetites. And I just wanted to begin, like you, by saying it's the Day of Atonement, and I certainly feel like I have to atone for not picking many of the ones that were just about as interesting as the 10. There was like another 15 that I could have talked about, and I, felt almost a little sick to my stomach in trying to figure out where to go with these. But anyway, here they are. So this first one, there were 2 paintings, both of which I liked, by this artist, Chenoa. And in this one, it felt very of the moment in a way, this kind of, or also very 80s, big figurative, narrative, painterly, clunky, dramatic thing with, mythological maybe elements and allusions that I couldn't really follow, but I'm curious about. It's in a pretty populated field. And so again, I can imagine with this one, very different kinds of, groups of work that could emerge out of it. The other painting was a self-portrait that was very charming and much more kind of modest and funnier. Well, this one, I don't know what the humor element might be. But anyway, it sort of backed up this one and made me especially excited about this artist because they felt like they had a lot of range, but not so much that I didn't trust that they were in a, that they had a real defined sense of themselves. So anyway, I like this kind of weird Black Bob Dylan profile on the right that could be like a warrior sacrificing. It could be like coming out of something Mayan. I like the figure on the left turning toward us. It felt like a lot of stuff was in play, a lot of pleasure in the painting, and again, left me curious. And maybe next one. So this was maybe the first one that jumped out at me of the whole group, a one that I felt especially excited about, partly because I know Amanda Church's work already, but also I thought this was it does a funny thing. It connects to so many modernist precedents that we know. It connects to Mondrian and late de Kooning, most obviously, and it feels sexual and knowing, and it's like a landscape, still life, body view, all these things. It could almost be too knowing. There's a risk there, I think, that it could be a little bit art smart, but I feel like it's to me it feels jaunty. It feels like it's slightly body sexual intimations stay very open-ended, and just like offer a lot of kind of immediate pleasure and the promise of more. The stuff that Shorakat was saying about not seeing the surface, of course, is especially true here. And I know her work a little bit in person, so I trust that the surface is a pleasure too. But here, graphically on the screen, it seems reduced. It seems like it's, turned into a kind of screen image only, which is a pity. Next.
Yeah, I agree with you. It gives the feeling that it's a computer generated image. I
Yeah.
don't know if it's the quality of the photo because I don't know her work. And it's true, you don't see the depth or the pictorial quality of I mean,
Yeah.
that's the limit of images. Yeah.
Right. Well, you know, whatever, seeing stuff digitally is a betrayal in all kinds of different ways, but in a funny way, especially here when it feels like we're seeing them well, but we're not. Okay. This is another artist whose work I know a little bit, or I haven't seen it in quite a few years. And I just thought these, you know, they're a little bit Richterish, but also sort of more physical, with the weave of the paper being kind of like almost caricatured, sort of Seurat rubbing drawings, those beautiful sfumato things. So again, it's a painting with a lot of precedence, like Amanda Church's. But I feel like it's bold and has a sense of it's like the landscape. It's taking a kind of landscapes like seen through a train at, you know, moving at high speed, and delivering it to you in a very efficient, simple, deft way. That's like, you know, landscape reduced to these basic blurry shapes of tone. It feels unlaborious and distilled, and it does something, you know, I think a lot of these things, it's more fun to have a discussion than to just be sort of like, think of this as a prize show. On the one hand, I feel like it's very satisfying, obviously. And on the other hand, I feel like there are dangers or limitations. It could be, you know, you can imagine this being a formula in a way that one worries a little bit about. But it's so quick and simple, and maybe it's a kind of love letter to Seurat. This one, I have a whole bunch of little tree images. It seems like there was a lot of trees. Sorry.
Yes, I agree with you. I've noticed that it's a very landscapey selection overall. I was quite surprised.
Yeah. I mean, I guess mine are, but the whole group was. Yeah. So this one I had sort of conflicted feelings about, especially because it felt, to be candid, it feels like this person is kind of very close to Graham Nixon in some ways, and is somebody who studied with Graham, no doubt, or at least I imagine, being at the school, thinking about Graham, and working pretty close to his manner in a way that, you know, isn't always a good thing to do, but and it's a kind of a version of Graham Nixon. It's kind of gaudier in a way, and a little bit more like there's a kind of a staccato rhythm to the brushstrokes that's pulling away from him. But I sort of don't like this painting, but I feel like it has a kind of energy, there's a kind of spatial drama around that tree, where these kind of like scratchy clumps of like unhealthy looking green are just kind of exciting. Like, I feel like there's a kind of drama to the space, shooting way back to that weird orange part, and to this like leaning central tree. It's just got this pizzazz that I kind of didn't want to pick it, but I felt like that the drama of this tree there and this weird weather kind of won me over despite myself. And this is another one where I really couldn't tell what kind of artist I'm looking at. I could imagine really different things. It's big, it's very kind of ornamental and decorative, and taking on fabric and maybe fabric ornament traditions in a way that's maybe closer a little bit to some of Shorakat's interests than my usual ones. so it's called Seven Brothers. There's a landscape there, obviously. It's very decorative, and I would love to know if this artist is kind of interested in like ornament traditions and using the landscape to kind of wrestle with them, or whether there's a kind of abstract symbology here, possibly. Like it could be very subject driven, or it could be not at all. And something about the size of it helped me kind of get on board and feel like there's an ambition that's not decorative alone, or if it's decorative in a kind of critical, self-conscious, like pattern and decoration movement kind of way. But I don't know. And I it's one of those things where I kind of want to like have 5 minutes with the artist and find out which of the multiple directions that are kind of intimated here is really where they're headed. I could imagine it being very cerebral, kind of Matthew Ritchie kind of artist, or very like relatively anti-intellectual kind of ornament-driven artist. Just don't know, but curious. Okay, so this one is maybe the most academic of the pictures I chose, and one of the most academic in the whole array that we looked at, with this very like kind of, you know, post-Cézanne grid-oriented, very set up thing that the studio school has always had a lot of people working in this language or this tradition. And so again, there's the question of, is it too narrow? Is it too kind of backward looking, or it becomes a kind of, the danger is it becomes a kind of craft, right? That this kind of like setting up little sectors with tilts and faceted angles and a sense of illumination, you know, you feel that there's the craft of the setting up of the still life, and then there's the craft of the painting it. It's a known world, but it's very beautifully done. You know, it's just like each like careful placement. It's you know, connected to what's his name, that English painter Ewan Uglow, and to, you know, a lot of available idioms. So I worry about Edmund Praeby. I feel like he's got to bust out of this, but he's very good at it. I don't know how to pronounce these artists' names, but Jerry Rachins. This was just a big burst of beautiful saturated color. And I like the kind of sense that there's a kind of like pineapple-y body-like form at the center of it that doesn't quite coalesce. It seemed again like an area where there's a bunch of people working in related ways, but this had a lot of strength and appetite, and you know, I felt like there were kind of skittering rhythms that drifted around the background parts of it. The color's fairly flat. It doesn't give away much about what its kind of content might be. Not content I'm not expecting content in a, you know, kind of named sense, but I feel like, I don't know if this person is just happily retro modernist or whether there's other stuff going on. I kind of hope so, that there's an agenda that I might not expect from all the kind of sealed, closed shape, fauve color that I'm seeing and enjoying. So I guess partly, you know, I think what I'm repeating myself and repeating stuff that Shorakat has said, where each of these things is really hard to assess because of the screen, because it's one picture, because it doesn't have a context. It feels like we're in this, you know, super open-ended art world where things are especially not what they might first appear. But anyway, just like the those kind of deep red oranges and greens are hard not to feel like I want to jump into. Cynthia Sparrenberger, not an artist I know, but what a pleasure the spatial drama of this is. Just that, like, you know, the viewer gets to like fall headlong down these fucking stairs and die at the end in this little white rectangle. It's so Dickinson related. I feel like Sparrenberger has a crush on Edwin Dickinson, but is really doing something great with Dickinson. You know, I feel like I imagine this is like one of those old Soho buildings that, you know, if there are still some galleries in some of them where you go up like 3 or 4 flights of stairs, and then on the way down you're like, man, what would happen if I slipped? But the tone is beautiful, you know, just it's almost like 2 tones, just deep dark, almost black and white, and it feels kind of smudgy and so vertiginous and also delicate. Like it's graphic, but then there's all this space to it, and it's so perspectival, so architectural, like it's like drawn by an architect with like a little bit of promising mental instability. Pamela Tudor. So this is just so airy and elegant. Ghost Forest. I'm afraid that, like, if the artist was talking about it, they would start talking about global warming and kind of sentimental environmentalism, and I would get turned off. But I can't resist just the like skinny pleasure of all those trunks and the simplicity of the way that they brighten toward the back. It's even connected a little bit to some of those beautiful Monet poplar paintings, now that I think about it. But it's you know, the little scratchy crowns, all dead, I guess, or maybe it's just winter, I don't know, but more likely dead. There, but no ground plane, so we just feel the recession from this thinning of the trunks. And there's kind of lovely, simple rhythm, bounce, bounce, bounce across those verticals. I don't know. I could imagine this is just a lucky painting by a person who's doing a different kind of work. I can't really imagine like a whole show of this. But I don't know. I'm super curious.
I agree with you. It's very virtuoso painting. It's so well done. And for me, it has the graphic beauty of the Belgian artist Leon Spillert on one side, but it's also some kind of gothic, almost scary feeling of a Stephen King's novel, you know, like Children's of the Corn or something like that, to it, that adds a little bit more depth to it. And of course, there's the tree. There are many trees in this year's selection.
Yeah, definitely tree heavy. Yeah,
I agree with you. I've also been wondering what's the entourage of this work. What are the other paintings of this artist? I can't imagine what's its environment and its world.
Yeah, I would love to have this turn out that this was a painting that came out of the artist's imagination or out of their head, but it could also be that it's a kind of filtered, stylized version of a, you know, photograph they took while visiting the Everglades or the New Hampshire woods or something like that. And that it wouldn't change this image, but it would change my sense of their promise.
Yeah, I agree with you. You don't know if it's just a recurring theme or thing that, I mean, within the artist's work, or just a contextual image, more something they saw. And
yeah. This is the most I'm gambling without knowing what I'm gambling on image of them all. For me, this, I think, again, there was a little bit of a premium on its unstudio school likeness for me. And I find it like, again, you can see, okay, if we're outing our own taste, you can see kind of like my, modernism displaying itself once again. But I felt like this had this kind of funny, like 3D anaglyph edge game going on to it, where like the two shapes are like almost like one shape seen twice, or there are two shapes, seen in some that require some sort of special glasses, and then they'll pop and jump forward or backward. The kind of stark, radical simplicity of it. They're a little bit figurative. They're a little bit bowling pin. They're a little bit optical. They're a little bit Barnett Newman. I find this like the kind of delicate waveringness of the edges, as if it's kind of a like, maybe it's like Barnett Newman and Morandi met and had a like one night together and produced this painting. I feel like there's a kind of a weird, pretty powerful possibility for a whole language here, a whole kind of like unexpected, harsh, sensuous, kind of mid-20th century painting that didn't happen then but is happening now. Very bold, but I don't know. I would love to, like, I could talk about this for a while, and I'm curious to see, like, Shorakat, I'm guessing this is not, wasn't even on the edge of your list.
Surprisingly, when I saw your selection, I thought, oh my God, I haven't even seen most of these works. I don't even remember. But, I went through the list multiple times, unless I've forgotten something. And a couple of things came after second, third round. But what was surprising, I haven't even connected
Like
with this work.
You didn't even notice this one. It just went right by. Yeah.
Totally
Yeah,
not.
that's funny.
Only a couple of them came to my attention. That was a surprise with most of your selection. Was it in the list? I think we looked at with different glasses. And
oh my God, because I felt exactly the same way. I like some of the ones you like best. I barely, I connected to them to things that I'm less interested in, or So I feel like you and I could have a really fun argument. If we had to be on like a 2-person panel and had to choose only 10, we would like end up, who knows?
I know, that was very surprising, because I think last year there were a lot of connections between the members of the jury, or even if there were no overlap, they were still kind of connected with the same aesthetics. And as you said, there was like the majority of the works had this kind of 3 directions. There was, well, the influence of Graham Nixon is very present, and with his interest in landscape and a certain flatness and a flat treatment of space. There's also Cézanne's greed. I was very surprised to see how Cézanne was present. And a third direction was the presence of the decorative in a few works, and in my selection, a couple of them had that touch to it. And I guess most of my selection comes from the outliers. I don't know if it was intentional, but probably because it corresponds to my own personal interest. I didn't try to look into the margins, but I think just naturally connected to my own interest.
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit closer to some of the, kind of the mainstream studio school interests most of the time. But again, like this one isn't that.
Yeah, I think I'm more in general interested in anti-intellectual paintings, probably that kind of, or that look like that. I mean, in terms, I'm speaking of aesthetics, nothing the process but.
Yeah, I'm not totally sure what anti-intellectual paintings look like, but you're making me curious. I want to see I want to see that show.
But I think, I don't know. Well, I guess I worked on Carol Apples. So I think the whole Cobra group, they were doing like intentionally anti-intellectual painting, trying to achieve this kind of, you know, what they spoke of.
Well, oh, but if art brut is anti-intellectual, that makes it a lot more open. I don't know. Cobra.
That's my background because of Cobra and
Yeah.
outside the art. So I'm naturally, I mean, although Cobra was just imitating or trying to achieve that kind of primordial process. And although they were most of them were highly intellectuals, but
Exactly. And that's the thing. Yeah.
they were
So
trying to unlearn.
it's anti-intellectual in quotes is different from anti-intellectual. Yeah.
Yeah, and for instance, I heard that most of these artists also try to paint with their left hand, trying to kind of unlearn what they knew. And I think this it's something that I'm genuinely interested in art history. For instance, when I created the retrospective of Lucio Fontana, who is a highly skilled artist in all mediums, he had a very traditional training, and I had the impression that over his career, as if he was trying to de-skill himself, and at the end of his life, he was doing these slashed canvases. I know many people see these works as a sort of iconoclastic work of a 20 years old artist, but it's not true. He started doing that when he was almost 60. So it gives you a different perspective. He was sort of trying to sacrifice his hand, you know, and his skills.
Right. Well, de-skilling is a huge part of modernism, you know, almost from Manet. Yeah.
Yes. And I guess also I have a very physical attraction to oil painting, the creaminess of oil painting, how much it looks like buttercream, and that plays a role, which is very frustrating for me because you cannot feel that on these images. And also I need to smell the paint. I remember during COVID when I was visiting museums with a mask on, I felt like I couldn't see the paintings, and I was realizing, what's wrong? I cannot see, should I come closer or not? And then I realized it's because I have the masks on. So I felt less connected with the painting, to not being able to sniff it and smell that intoxicating smell of oil.
Maybe as you're talking, I'm thinking maybe that's one of the things that drew me to this one, is that like the white goes back to the screen. The black is invisible. There's just this little tiny edge where we can see the kind of buttercream feeling, the like a little narrow band of tactile as well as color pleasure.
Mm-hmm. And I think also because these images are cropped, you don't see them in their environment. You just lose that physicality.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I mean, there's also a lot to say about how to photograph paintings and how it can be tricky. And I think we've all been at some point in our lives disappointed the first time we saw real Salvador Dali, because they never look like the paintings. And same with Agnes Martin, was an artist that doesn't photograph well, and which is the opposite of Dali.
Mm-hmm. Kara, do we want to take questions, or should we go back through some of these images? Are there any that we
Oh yes, we would love to speak with anyone who wants to jump in.
Great. Yes, thank you both. This is just such a rich conversation. I invite all of our attendees to write your questions into the Q&A chat. And while we're waiting for those questions to come in, I wanted to ask you both a question that comes up in my class with my students is this, the question of how much biography you need to know to understand a work. And, you know, this process for you both is obviously very challenging because it's one image, maybe two images, and you're asked to understand or appreciate a work without any other context, right? No wall label, no biography. Of course, we can Google as we Google, but I wonder if you could just speak a little bit about that relationship of knowing an artist's name or biography or their practice, and seeing just one example and what that relationship is like just based on the visual information you're given.
It's a question I ask myself all the time because I've worked on several artists who have just highly romantic, tragic, dramatic biographies, like Albert Pinkham Ryder, Henry Darger, and Stéphane Mandelbaum, who will have an exhibition at the Drawing Center this fall, who died at 25 years old, assassinated when he was trying to steal a Modigliani painting. So all these three artists had this highly romantic biography. So of course, when I was working on them, I was trying to criticize myself how I'm attracted to the biography versus the work. For some artists, I saw the works before knowing about the biography, like Ryder or Darger, and I'm attracted to both. For Stéphane Mandelbaum, I heard about him, saw images before discovering his work. So I had to just figure out. And I know for Stéphane Mandelbaum and also Henry Darger, I've seen art historians handle this in two ways. There are those who just merge into the drama and add their own corny, dramatic lecture of the work. And there are some kind of art historians who want to be very snobbish, and I won't indulge into that. So I'm going to stay very far, just be very formalist in a formalist analysis, but they're just ignoring the pink elephant in the room. I don't like any of these approaches. I like to integrate both and be more direct and just embrace all the romance and all that. However, speaking about this artist and the selection, I think for me it was more problematic to see only one work. I think Alexa also discussed that. Do you know if it's just an accidentally beautiful work, or is it part of something, and how it relates to the whole body of work? For me, it's more important than knowing about the biography. And I think if you see a lot of the works, there's also a more natural connection with the biography that comes. Obviously, if I'm interested in something, I want to know more biography and all, but this is not necessarily the center. And some artists can do exciting works and have very boring biographies. So
yeah, I think, we all dream of work that's so strong that it's independent of any need for context. And sometimes that's true. But I think back a few years ago, I was on a panel screening artists for something, and the panelists all wanted to do the whole process blind. And at one point, an artist's work came up and everybody was very dismissive, saying this is obviously like derivative of X. And it turned out it was X. It was just, it was a famous artist who was doing slightly like a kind of a drawing project that was a little different from their normal work. And it would have been rejected, except that somebody like did a little homework and told us actually it's not derivative, it's but it could almost have happened that the person would have been rejected for being derivative of them, for being themselves.
that happens with many great artists, to be derivative of themselves. That happens. That's a big question, especially when it comes to the late work. That's an important issue for artists.
Well, right. This was in a way, that's a slightly different issue. Derivative from themselves is when they're sort of losing maybe their impulse. And this was really a case of somebody resembling themselves. I should have said it that way.
But I think for this process, it was almost a blind process for me, because as I was saying, there was a lot of works. I couldn't just research almost 200 works. So my selection was really blind. Even though I Googled some of them, it didn't bring up much. I don't think it has really informed my selection. I mean, certainly not biographies, maybe seeing other works of the same artist, but.
Yeah. I mean, I have like a long list of like Hearn Party's studio painting, or Emma McCagg's Curator, or there was a painting by somebody named Fickthorn of ping pong players that I really liked. There's so many more. And I love that there was a painting of John Brown by somebody whose last name is Friedman, which is an example of an aptronym situation, I think, where the name and the art are perfectly suited to one another, or ironically over-connected, maybe.
Well, thank you both for this really wonderful conversation. It's lovely to kind of look with you as you talk us through what you see and how you see, and we're grateful for your expertise and time today. I just want to conclude with encouraging our members of the alumni community to stay in touch, to remember that we're always champions of your work and your achievements. Please do send us news of your exhibitions and awards for us to share on our social media channels and in our monthly newsletter. Finally, we are putting together our alumni exhibition catalog this year, and I will put a link here in the chat. If you're interested in pre-ordering, the link is live. We've done something of a new redesign, so we're excited to share that with you very, very soon. And we're looking forward to sharing a lot of exciting events coming up at the New York Studio School. This week, we launch our fall season of the evening lecture series with a talk by Jesse Mockren tomorrow evening at 6:30. And we'll follow that the following night with Arlene Kaiser, who recently published an award-winning book on Beaufort Delaney, an artist who is actually living and working in our building when it was the Whitney. So we're excited to bring him back into the building as well. Those lectures start at 6:30 on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. They're in person and live streaming, so please join us. We are also excited to be hosting 3 days of gallery talks in our current Ruth Miller exhibition. We have a stellar lineup of artists who have studied with her or know her work quite well. Those will take place in person at our location on 8th Street, and they are also going to be live streamed on our Instagram Live channel. And our big benefit is coming up in October in just a few weeks. We'd love to see you at the benefit, even for the cocktail hour, or potentially even the silent auction from 6 to 8 p.m. And we still have some dinner tickets available as well. So with that, thank you, Shorakat. Thank you, Alexi, and congratulations to our 2023 Mercedes Matter Award winners. And we look forward to doing this all again next year.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alexi. Thank you, Shorakat. Congrats on your new show.